Stench soup.
I was swimming in a lake by my parents' cottage early in the morning. It is a lovely place, surrounded by tall trees, and there are many old, abandoned buildings that I can explore when no one else is home. The water here is so clear it's like looking down at a model village from an airliner above. My dad said it was fed from a nearby river, but he also said not to drink it. Help! Help! A young woman called out to me as she ran into view on the other side of the lake. Oh, thank God you're here. Her voice trailed off with her panting for breath. She must have been running for miles before she found us. Her dark hair was disheveled, long, and wavy, and she looked very frightened indeed. What's wrong? I asked. She kept looking around nervously, then shook her head and bit her lip. My sister, she whispered. She disappeared last night, and she started crying and hugged herself tight against the coldness of the wind. Who is your sister? I asked quietly as I moved closer to help support her. She smelled good, flowers, or something similar, and seemed more human than the other things we've met recently. Her name is Angela. She's only 13 years old and, well, she paused to collect herself. You probably think I'm stupid for saying this because all adults do, but my little sister has been possessed by some sort of ghost or demon, and she seems evil now. Like a witch, maybe? I didn't know whether to believe her, so I kept quiet until I could figure out why she was telling me such stories in the first place. So tell me about how you lost her. I finally prompted her. She glanced back across the lake and seemed even more afraid for someone that had already been terrified earlier. We were both sleeping late last night when she suddenly jumped up screaming and shouting. Her eyes turned completely black with red lines around them too. It was awful. She then walked down to the lake and vanished into the water. And you don't think it might be a trick? She nodded solemnly, shaking her head sadly. But no, there's definitely something else going on here. Do you live near here? No, not far away, but the house we used to stay in has been empty for ages. No one wants to move close enough to hear the screams. Then let us find your sister right now, I told her firmly. We crossed over the bridge together, holding hands as she sobbed quietly, and I tried hard to convince myself she wasn't making this all up. There weren't any houses nearby, as she'd said, but there were signs of people having camped out at one time. Old clothes and plastic bags littered around, and torn pieces of paper everywhere. Scribbled notes that may have been instructions left for themselves or their children before they disappeared. My mind raced through these possibilities. Was I actually talking with a girl who had lost her sister? Or perhaps some sort of possession or ghost story was simply being played out for my benefit alone? The thought made my heart skip a beat. What is this place? I asked her once we found the shore. This is an old mental hospital, she replied. I've heard stories about the place from the older kids that live in the woods near the lake. They say lots of bad things happen to people here. She paused. I'm not sure if you're real, but thank you for coming to help me. I'm scared to be out here by myself. She started crying again, leaning forward so that our foreheads touched briefly and wiping her nose with her sleeve. I reached up and gently wiped away a tear rolling down her cheek too. What should we do first? I whispered softly. She took a moment to regain her composure and then shook her head. I don't know. It's so quiet around here. So we can't leave yet. We stood staring into the water together as we listened to the trees rustling overhead and the gentle sound of the wind blowing through them. It felt like everything else around us was holding its breath, waiting in silence as we looked on, expecting something terrible to happen soon. I didn't get your name, by the way, she finally said. My friends call me Danny. Hi, Danny, she said with a shy smile. Hello, I said back. What's your name? I realized that I hadn't even bothered asking what hers was before now. It's Emily, she answered with a nod. Thank you again for doing this for me. Do you really think you can find her? We'll find her no matter where she is. Then I suddenly stopped talking because something seemed very wrong. Something about her eyes. What is it? Emily asked when she noticed my sudden change of mood. Do you sense something strange in the air? I turned to face the lake, then gasped sharply and dropped to my knees. There was a figure standing on water right next to the shoreline, almost in plain sight, and it wasn't human at all. Its dark, scaly skin rippled beneath a long coat that trailed off into a black cloak hanging down over its legs, revealing 4 spider-like limbs ending in claws instead of hands or feet. Is that... I couldn't finish as I tried to calm down and look again. The monster had been looking directly at me for several seconds by now, but still didn't move an inch from where it stood. "It's not moving," Emily exclaimed fearfully as she knelt beside me too. She stared wide-eyed while we both stayed frozen on the ground. My mind was reeling with questions. Was this creature a ghost? A demonic entity possessed the girl? What was it doing here anyway? And why was there something familiar about the way it looked? The girl, Emily, gave a scream that I could barely hear above the rushing sound in my ears. But what made me truly aware of the noise that surrounded us came much later. In fact, this is probably one of those moments where time has slowed for me. The moment of absolute silence followed immediately by deafening silence, like someone took away the volume control. Then everything exploded with light. Not like lightning or fire though. This was more like a flashbulb going off inside my head. Suddenly the world went white around me, making it hard to see anything and forcing me to shut my eyes instinctively. When they opened again after a few seconds, everything was changed forever. That's all I can say, because nothing else can describe how impossible and incredible it felt to witness at that very instant. I saw things in ways that were beyond any other reality that I knew before now. Emily and I weren't on the shore anymore. We stood together on some kind of stone platform that had appeared out of nowhere in midair. No one else seemed to be nearby, but I still sensed another presence nearby, even if I couldn't see it yet. "Angela," she called out quietly behind me so she wouldn't disturb whatever it was lurking just outside our sight. "Yeah," a voice answered back from somewhere ahead. It sounded young. "Where are we?" "A secret place." The reply came from directly across from where we were standing, with no trace of anyone speaking it aloud. "This way, please," said the voice. The platform beneath our feet started moving forward, then rose slowly into the air until the top disappeared completely. When the gray sky above faded into darkness, I heard a gasp coming from Emily, as well as the faint sound of something whistling through the air next to her head. My vision quickly adjusted again to make sense of what I could see again as Emily and I walked towards a doorway that grew up in front of us in response to my movement, alone. The door opened with a hiss of steam and a gentle whoosh like wind blowing in between trees, and suddenly I was inside. Leave a comment if you'd like to hear part 2!